Pam Bondi gets kicked out of court. Moments later, the judge loses his job. You won't believe what just happened. Pam Bondi wasn't new to pressure. She had built her career taking on powerful figures, exposing corruption, and standing firm in the face of adversity. But today, as she stepped into Judge Howard Gates' courtroom, a feeling of unease settled in her gut. This wasn't an ordinary hearing. This case had the potential to shake up the highest levels of government. The defendant? A billionaire real estate mogul, Richard Callaway, accused of siphoning millions of taxpayer dollars into his private business empire. The evidence was stacked high: financial records, whistleblower testimonies, even surveillance footage. Pam had spent months building this case. Sleepless nights, countless hours, personal sacrifices. She had missed family dinners, ignored phone calls from friends, and spent too many nights staring at her office ceiling, wondering if justice would ever win. But she was here now, ready. As she approached the prosecution's table, she adjusted her blazer, exhaled slowly, and turned toward the man who could make or break this case, Judge Howard Gates. The weight of injustice. Judge Gates was a man feared by many in the legal community. Ruthless. Unpredictable. Known for humiliating attorneys in his courtroom. And today, it seemed like Pam was his next target. He leaned forward, eyes cold, voice dripping with condescension. "Ms. Bondi, I assume you're ready to waste more of this court's time?" A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Pam clenched her jaw. She had dealt with arrogant judges before, but something about Gates' tone felt different today. Still, she refused to be intimidated. "Your Honor, I have substantial evidence proving that." Substantial? Gates scoffed, cutting her off. Or just another weak attempt at career grandstanding? Laughter echoed from the defense table. Richard Callaway smirked, leaning back in his chair as if he already knew the outcome. Pam's grip tightened around her case files. "Stay calm. Focus." She took a breath, steadying herself. The people deserve to know the truth. But before she could continue, Judge Gates slammed his gavel down. "That's enough." Then came the moment no one expected. Gates leaned back in his chair, a cruel grin on his face. "You know what, Ms. Bondi? I don't think you belong in my courtroom. Get out." The room fell into stunned silence. Pam's heart pounded. Did she just hear that correctly? "Excuse me," she said, barely keeping her voice steady. Gates smirked. "You heard me. You're dismissed. Get out before I hold you in contempt." Pam looked around, searching for any sign of protest, but the legal system wasn't built to challenge a judge like Gates. No one dared to speak up. Slowly, she gathered her files. Every step toward the exit felt like a walk of shame. But just as she reached the courtroom doors, something stopped her. A thought. A realization. Something wasn't right. Judge Gates wanted her gone, but why? And then, like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place, it hit her. This wasn't just a personal attack. This was something bigger. Something deeper, and Pam Bondi wasn't going down without a fight. Pam Bondi stepped out of the courthouse, the heavy wooden doors slamming shut behind her. The midday sun was blinding, but she barely noticed. Her mind raced, replaying the scene over and over. "You don't belong in my courtroom." Judge Gates' words echoed in her head like a taunt, a challenge, a warning. She had been humiliated, stripped of her authority in front of the entire courtroom. But more than that, something felt wrong. Judge Gates wasn't just being arrogant. He was hiding something. Pam's instincts had never failed her before, and she wasn't about to ignore them now. She started walking, fast and aimless, her heels clicking against the concrete sidewalk. The city buzzed around her, horns blaring, voices rising and falling, but everything felt distant, muted. That was until she nearly ran straight into a man standing near the courthouse steps. "Whoa, careful there." Pam staggered back, startled. Her eyes focused, and in front of her stood someone she never expected to see in person. Elon Musk. A meeting of power and influence. For a moment, Pam wondered if she was imagining things. What was he doing here? Elon Musk was dressed casually, black t-shirt, dark jeans, a sharp contrast to the sea of suits that usually surrounded the courthouse. But despite his laid-back appearance, there was something about him. A presence. A mixture of confidence and curiosity flickered in his sharp eyes as he studied her. "You look like you just walked out of a war zone," he said, his voice smooth yet amused. Pam blinked, still in mild shock. "You could say that?" Elon smirked. "Let me guess. Gates." Her stomach dropped. How did he know? She folded her arms, suddenly wary. "What do you know about Judge Gates?" Instead of answering, Elon motioned to a nearby bench. "Come on. Sit." Pam hesitated. This was insane. One of the most influential men in the world had just appeared out of nowhere, acting as if he had been expecting her. But something told her to listen. She sat beside him, the world still rushing around them as if this were just another ordinary conversation. Elon leaned back, glancing toward the courthouse. "You're not the first person he's tried to silence." Pam's pulse quickened. He knew something. She turned to face him fully. "And you just happen to be standing outside this courthouse, waiting for someone like me?" Elon chuckled. "I don't believe in coincidences." His expression turned serious. "Listen, Pam. You're in the middle of something much bigger than you realize. Gates isn't just corrupt, he's bought. And if he's kicking you out of his courtroom, it's because you were about to expose something or someone." Pam clenched her fists. She knew it. Her case against Richard Calloway wasn't just about one man's greed. It was a chain reaction. A single exposed thread that could unravel something massive. "So what now?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Elon tapped his fingers against the bench, as if considering something. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black envelope. "This might help." Pam hesitated before taking it. The weight of whatever was inside felt heavier than it should have been. She slid her finger under the seal, pulling out a USB drive. Elon's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Everything you need to take Gates down is on there." Pam's breath caught in her throat. "How do you have this?" Elon stood up, shoving his hands in his pockets. "Let's just say, I have a habit of keeping receipts." Pam stared at the USB in her palm, her mind spinning. This wasn't just about her case anymore. This was bigger. Much bigger. And now, she had the power to do something about it. Pam sat frozen on the bench, the small USB drive burning in her palm like a live wire. Her instincts screamed at her. This was dangerous. She looked up at Elon, but he was already a few steps away, blending into the crowd. "Why are you helping me?" she called after him. He paused, turning back slightly. "Because the system is broken. And you? You're one of the few people still trying to fix it." With that, he disappeared into the streets of D.C., leaving Pam with more questions than answers. She exhaled sharply. This is insane. But if there was even a chance that this drive contained proof of corruption, of Judge Gates, Richard Calloway, and whoever else was pulling the strings, then she had no choice but to see it through. She stuffed the USB into her coat pocket, squared her shoulders, and hailed a cab. The evidence that changes everything. Back at her office, Pam plugged the USB into her laptop, her hands slightly trembling. A single folder popped up on the screen. Confidential, Gates Payments. Her heart pounded as she clicked it open. Inside were hundreds of files. Bank transfers, wire logs, offshore accounts, all linking Judge Gates to a massive bribery scheme. Pam scrolled through the documents, her breath catching as she saw the names of powerful figures, politicians, corporate moguls, even other judges. Gates had been covering for them, burying cases, dismissing lawsuits, and in return he was being paid millions. Then she found something even worse. A recorded phone call. With shaking fingers, she pressed play. A gruff voice, "Gates. You think I care who Bondi brings into my courtroom? She could have the FBI backing her, and it wouldn't make a damn difference. I decide what happens. She's done." Pam's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about shutting down her case. Gates had planned to destroy her career. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Elon hadn't just given her a lifeline, he had given her the ammunition to take Gates down. But the real question was, how would she use it? Pam sat motionless in her chair, staring at the damning evidence on her screen. Every instinct in her body screamed danger. Judge Gates was more than corrupt. He was powerful. If he had the influence to dismiss her in open court, then exposing him wouldn't just be a career risk, it could cost her everything. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Pam Bondi. Silence. Then a slow, deliberate voice. You're making a mistake. A chill ran down her spine. They know. She forced herself to stay calm. Who is this? A small chuckle. Someone who's trying to help you. Walk away, Pam. You don't want to play this game. The line went dead. Pam's grip tightened around the phone. She had handled high-profile cases before, taken down some of the most powerful criminals in the country. But this was different. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was war. She took a shaky breath, her decision already made. She wasn't backing down. The courtroom showdown. The next morning, the courthouse was packed. Journalists lined the halls, cameras flashing as Pam walked toward the courtroom doors. She had one shot at this. Inside, Judge Gates sat at the bench, his usual smug expression in place. His gavel slammed down. Ms. Bondi, I thought I made myself clear yesterday. This hearing is over. Pam didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled a small flash drive from her pocket and held it up. Then maybe you'd like to explain why I have proof that you've been accepting bribes for over a decade. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. For the first time, Gates' confident smirk wavered. You're bluffing. Pam walked forward, handing a file to the court clerk. I've already submitted the evidence to the state's attorney's office. Every bank transfer, every hidden transaction, every case you manipulated, it's all here. And I'm sure the press outside would love to hear your defense. A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. The journalists in attendance scribbled furiously, cameras clicking as Gates' face turned pale. This is outrageous, Gates began, but his voice shook. Then, the doors swung open. 2 federal agents entered. One of them held up a warrant. Judge Howard Gates, you're under arrest for bribery, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Pam stood still, watching as the judge, the man who had tried to ruin her, was led away in handcuffs. As he passed her, he leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper. You don't know what you've started. Pam met his gaze, unflinching. Oh, I think I do. The doors shut behind him. A slow, thunderous applause erupted in the courtroom. She had done it. But deep down she knew this was just the beginning. The moment Judge Gates was led out in handcuffs, Pam Bondi felt the weight of the last 24 hours crash over her. She had won. The man who had humiliated her, tried to destroy her career, and manipulated the justice system for years was finally exposed. Justice had been served. But deep down, Pam knew this was just the beginning. The aftermath. The courtroom emptied quickly, reporters scrambling outside to break the story. Pam stayed back, sinking into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Her phone buzzed. Elon Musk. She answered. It's done. The pause. Then his calm voice. I know. I just watched the footage. Pam exhaled. So what happens now? Elon chuckled lightly. Now? You prepare for the storm. Gates wasn't working alone. Pam closed her eyes for a moment. Of course. She had just taken down a judge, but the names on that USB drive, there were more. Bigger ones. This fight wasn't over. A public reckoning. Hours later, the news had spread like wildfire. Breaking, Judge Howard Gates arrested for corruption, bribery scandal shakes legal system. Pam watched the coverage from her office, her phone buzzing nonstop with messages of support, shock, and even threats. Then, something unexpected happened. Her assistant knocked on the door, peeking in. There's someone here to see you. Before Pam could respond, the door opened wider, and a woman stepped in. She was in her mid-40s, dressed in simple business attire, her face weary but determined. Ms. Bondi, my name is Rebecca Hayes. My brother was wrongfully convicted 5 years ago by Judge Gates. Pam straightened, listening carefully. Rebecca's eyes welled up. I saw what you did today. You proved that the system isn't untouchable. Please, help me get justice for my brother. Pam swallowed hard. She had spent so long fighting this battle alone, but now? People were looking to her, not just as a prosecutor, but as a symbol of change. She looked down at the case files scattered on her desk. The USB drive still sat beside her laptop, containing the names of more corrupt officials. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Pam met Rebecca's gaze, determination burning in her chest. "Tell me everything,"